Did you know that the biggest financial mistake in Wall Street history was avoided by a 23-year-old office boy earning $15 an hour? While MIT PhDs and Harvard MBAs were preparing to lose $500 million on a single IPO, the person who saved the operation was pushing a paper cart through the hallways. This is the disturbing story of how prejudice nearly destroyed one of America's largest investment firms. A story of wasted talent, blind hierarchies, and the explosive moment when genius finally refused to remain invisible. Terrence Williams shouldn't have been in the Goldman & Associates executive boardroom that Tuesday in December. He should have been in the service areas, away from key investors, fulfilling his role as a suitably invisible employee. But when you discover that a mathematical error could destroy the retirements of thousands of people, remaining silent is no longer an option. What you're about to discover will challenge everything you think about meritocracy, competence, and the true value of the people around you. Because sometimes the brightest minds aren't where we expect to find them. Fire him. Fire this brat immediately, Victoria Sterling whispered into the intercom, her cold eyes fixed on Terrence Williams, who was organizing documents near the control room. He can't be anywhere near this operation. The marble floor of Goldman & Associates reflected the red lights of the monitors. Wall Street's largest firm was 4 hours away from the most important IPO in its history, MedTech Solutions, with $2 billion at stake. Victoria adjusted her Armani blazer and smiled at the Korean investors. "Gentlemen, welcome. We are honored to lead you through this historic opportunity." But something was wrong. Bloomberg terminals were showing strange fluctuations. Algorithms were issuing alerts that no one could decipher. And worse, the regulatory deadline was 4 hours away. Terrence discreetly pushed his cart, his worn sneakers contrasting with his $1,000 Louboutins. No one noticed him. No one saw the Howard University math degree in his Bronx apartment. And no one imagined that in his hands lay the calculations that would save $500 million. 3 hours earlier, Goldman Sachs was buzzing like a billionaire's hive. Victoria announced in the war room, "The MedTech IPO will be at 1 p.m. Revolutionary medical devices, AI applied to heart surgeries, government contracts worth more than the GDP of entire countries. This transaction represents international expansion, bonuses that will buy homes in the Hamptons." The bosses nodded. The quantitative director described AI models. The derivatives supervisor confirmed secure pricing. Compliance assured the securities were approved. "Remember," Victoria lowered her voice, "one mistake today and our reputation disappears. The Koreans control 40% of the Asian market. One misstep and they'll migrate to Morgan Stanley." The CFO hesitated. "Victoria, I've heard rumors about inconsistencies in the algorithms. Shouldn't we get a second opinion?" Victoria waved dismissively. "Our systems cost $50 million. We have MIT PhDs running models NASA would use. Algorithms don't lie, Michael. People do." She stopped the operations manager. "Marcus, the area is spotless today. No support staff getting in the way, especially that office boy." "Terrence Williams," Marcus replied. "He's been working for 2 years, always punctual." "I don't care. I want total invisibility. Koreans can't see inappropriate people wandering around the executive floors." Victoria checked her Patek Philippe. 3 hours to MedTech. She straightened a crooked frame and smiled. Everything perfect. Everything under control. Underground, Terrence organized morning deliveries with mathematical precision. At 23, 2 years of invisible labor in a world of visible luxury. In the basement cubicle, Terrence sorted documents with the precision of someone who understands complex systems. He was a 23-year-old black man in a navy blue uniform, but beneath the shirt beat the heart of a brilliant mathematician. His desk was a stark contrast. Delivery sheets on one side, notebooks with differential equations on the other. Among corporate documents, stochastic calculus in finance on his lunchtime reading. "Terrence, Marcus has stacked papers. Take these contracts to the 35th floor. Then distribute the market analyses." Busy day. "Of course, Marcus." 2 years of respectful courtesy. Being polite, punctual, and invisible was survival. Unlike Howard University, where professors recognized your ability to solve problems that perplexed graduate students. Pushing the cart through the marble corridors, Terrence remembered when these equations were discussed in prestigious halls. a bachelor's degree in applied mathematics, specializing in statistical modeling, honors that meant nothing when you owed $50,000 in hospital debt. Everything changed on a frigid Tuesday in January. The phone call from Mount Sinai echoed, "Mr. Williams, we regret to inform you that your father has suffered a massive heart attack." Samuel Williams, a janitor for 30 years, worked 3 jobs to pay for his son's education. He died at 58 without seeing Terence graduate. Medical debt turned his dream of graduate school into a financial nightmare. Temporary, Terence had said when he took the job, just until he got his finances in order. 2 years later, there he was. The irony was not lost. He saw former classmates, those with parents bankrolling Harvard MBAs, walking the upper floors in $1,000 suits. They barely acknowledged him, averting their gazes in the elevators. In the marble's reflection, he saw a young man who should have been creating revolutionary algorithms, not delivering reports. Wall Street had taught him, talent without connections is wasted potential. He pulled out his battered smartphone. Bank notification, late payment, hospital debt. He sighed and put the phone away. Wall Street would discover what happens when extreme necessity meets pure genius. Within hours, those notebooks would become the difference between glory and disaster. 9 Paris. First signs of trouble. Terence was organizing documents when he heard tense voices from the quantitative analysis room. "These fluctuations don't make sense." Dr. Peterson frowned at the conflicting monitors. "The Black-Scholes algorithm generates values that vary by 12%. Statistically impossible." Jennifer Walsh, Harvard MBA, typed frantically. "I ran it 5 times. Inconsistent results." As if there were a phantom variable. Terence slowed his pace, pretending to rearrange papers. Years of studying probabilistic models had led him to recognize calibration error in risk systems. Victoria has erupted like a hurricane. "What's the status?" "We have 4 hours. Victoria, anomalies in the pricing data." Peterson nervously adjusted his glasses. "Nothing catastrophic, but I recommend reviewing it before the IPO." Victoria's face hardened. "Anomalies? 50 million systems, calibrated by MIT PhDs, experience anomalies 4 hours before the biggest operation of the year. It is protocol to do checks when—" "Protocol." Victoria banged on the table. Monitors trembled. "Our protocol is to deliver results, not create problems. The Koreans arrive in 2 hours expecting a flawless operation." Jennifer tried to mediate. "Maybe contact IT for a second opinion on the codes." "Second opinion?" Victoria laughed dismissively. "Jennifer, you have an MBA from Harvard. Michael, a PhD from MIT. You're some of the brightest minds on the East Coast, and you need help from IT." From the hallway, Terence watched the tension escalate. He saw numbers on the screens, patterns he recognized. The problem wasn't with the raw data, but with the way the algorithm processed correlations. A subtle, almost imperceptible error, but one that would amplify exponentially under the IPO's volume. "Listen carefully," Victoria continued, her voice sharp. "We have investors putting $2 billion into our portfolio. We're not going to sabotage it out of statistical paranoia." Peterson insisted, "I only suggest caution. If there is an undetected error, if there's a mistake, it's 100% your responsibility. I don't pay 6-figure salaries for excuses. I pay for solutions." Palpable silence. Peterson and Jennifer exchanged resigned glances. Hierarchy had stifled scientific instinct. "Understood," Peterson murmured. Victoria left confidently, but Terence remained, watching analysts resume their work with visible discomfort. He knew the feeling, knowing something was wrong, but having no power to act. 9:15. 3 hours and 45 minutes until the biggest mistake in Wall Street history, and the only person capable of detecting it was pushing a cart, invisible to everyone. An hour later, Terence was distributing reports on the 42nd floor when he discovered confirmation of his fears. Among the documents was a stress testing analysis marked confidential. He quickly flipped through Monte Carlo simulations, testing medtech under different scenarios. Scenario 1, stable market, profit 340%. Scenario 2, moderate volatility, profit 180%. Scenario 3, moderate stress, profit 45%. Scenario 4, severe stress, loss 78%. Blood ran cold. The last scenario wasn't fantasy. It was statistically likely within 6 months for any biotech IPO. A footnote in fine print: analysis based on industry-standard parameters does not incorporate medtech-specific adjustments. A new chapter has been turned. The system used data from Johnson & Johnson and Medtronic to assess medtech risk. How to use commercial pilot data to evaluate fighter pilots. "Terence, are you okay?" Elena Rodriguez, the only analyst who greeted him, was leaving the printing room with documents. "Hi, Elena. Just organizing reports." Elena noticed his tense expression. "You look worried." Terence hesitated. Elena treated him like a human, not furniture, but he was a junior analyst, no real power. "Elena, do you understand derivatives pricing models?" "A little. Why?" He looked around, making sure they were alone. If a 4-year-old company were priced using volatility parameters from 50-year-old companies, wouldn't that create massive distortion in the model? Elena frowned. "Yeah, sure. Implied volatility would be totally—" "Wait." Her eyes widened. "You're talking about medtech?" Terence didn't answer. Expression said it all. "Oh my God," Elena whispered. "Error in the IPO models? I'm just an office boy. But if there were, hypothetically, it would be catastrophic," Elena added. "Terence, if he suspects anything, needs to talk to someone." "Who should I talk to?" Bitterness seeped out. "I'm a 23-year-old black kid who delivers coffee. Who's going to listen to me against MIT PhDs? Elena approached. "You have a background in mathematics, don't you? I saw technical books on your desk." Terence nodded. "Bachelor's degree in applied mathematics from Howard. But it doesn't matter here." "Yes, it does matter. If you've identified a problem that others haven't, you have a moral obligation to speak up." "Moral obligation?" Terence laughed humorlessly. "Eleanor, this firm pays me $15 an hour to be invisible. My obligation is to pay my dead father's medical bills." Heels approaching, Victoria appeared, her expression changing as she saw them talking. "Elena, shouldn't you be preparing materials? And you, shouldn't you be in the service areas?" "Yes, ma'am," they both replied. Victoria followed, giving him an icy look that said, "Stay where you are." When she disappeared, Elena touched Terence's arm. "Think about what we discussed. If you're right, thousands of lives could be lost." Terence watched her leave. He glanced at his report, then at his watch. 11:30. 90 minutes to decide. Remain safe in invisibility or risk everything to avoid a disaster that would destroy lives. Who would believe the office boy against Wall Street? 12. 1 hour until the IPO. Terence, in the bathroom on the 35th floor, splashing cold water on his face, made the decision that would change everything. He looked at himself in the mirror. A young man who had spent 2 years invisible, but invisibility was no longer an option. Not with $500 million and 1,000 pensions at stake. He dried his face, straightened his shirt, and walked determinedly to the 47th floor, executive territory, where office boys only entered when called. The elevator had never seemed so slow. Each floor weighed heavily on the decision. His career would be over in minutes, he'd be fired for disrespect. But Elena was right. Some things were more important than personal safety. Doors opened, revealing a white marble hallway. Terence took a deep breath and walked in as if he had a right to be there. The meeting room was packed. Victoria presided, flanked by Korean directors and investors. Medtech charts dominated the screens, golden projections promising fortunes. As you can see, Victoria was showing an upward trend. Our analysis indicates minimal exposure with exceptional returns. Literally the best of both worlds. Terence stopped at the door. This was the moment. There was no turning back. "Excuse me." All heads turned. Deafening silence. Victoria turned pale as a ghost. "What are you doing here?" Terence walked in, sneakers clicking in the silence. "I need to talk about medtech pricing models. There's a critical error that—" "Leave immediately!" Victoria exploded, knocking over a glass of water. "Security, please just listen to me for 2 minutes. The volatility parameters are—" "Who do you think you are?" Victoria walked around the table, her face red. "You're an office boy. A coffee delivery boy. How dare you interrupt an executive meeting?" Peterson and Jennifer watched, transfixed. Koreans whispered in confusion. James Morrison, CEO of MedTech, frowned. "My name is Terence Williams," my voice firm, ignoring Victoria's threatening tone. I have a bachelor's degree in applied mathematics from Howard University, and I identified an error in the Black-Scholes model. Ridiculous, Victoria gestured. Are you suggesting that Office Boy spotted an error that MIT PhDs missed? I'm saying that their algorithms use volatility parameters of established companies to price a 4-year-old startup, which Terence has gained confidence in. The model creates the illusion of low risk that can result in catastrophic losses. Victoria laughed dismissively. You've read books and think you understand quantitative finance. I understand enough to know that when implied volatility doesn't match actual historical volatility, delta-neutral hedging becomes useless. The laughter died away. Victoria looked at Peterson, who had gone pale. Morrison leaned in. Young man, can you explain specifically what error you identified? Victoria turned around furiously. James, you can't be taking this seriously. He's been working here for 2 years, Peterson interrupted smoothly, and he just used terminology that 90% of analysts don't understand. Silence returned. All eyes were on Terence at the center of the storm he had created. 30 seconds, Morrison said. Explain the error. Terence took a deep breath. His entire life had led to this moment. Everything depended on the next 30 seconds. Terence walked up to the monitors, sneakers contrasting with the solemn silence. Executives in $3,000 suits, international investors, the most powerful woman at Goldman. In the center, a 23-year-old office boy defying Wall Street. May I? He pointed to the presentation control. Morrison nodded. Victoria stood rigid as a statue. Terence clicked, switching to technicals. This chart shows MedTech implied volatility calculated at 18%. Correct? Peterson nodded nervously. Now look at this. He pulled out a crumpled notebook, pages covered in handwritten equations. I calculated the real figure based on the MedTech specific track record, 4 years, biotech, no stable revenue until 2022. He pointed out manual calculations. Actual volatility should be between 31% and 38%, not 18%. His algorithms use industry average data, including giants like Johnson & Johnson, which has been around for 137 years. Jennifer leaned over, scanning handwritten numbers. This would completely change the hedging model. Exactly. With 35% volatility, the real delta would be 0.73, not 0.12, as the system shows. Under market stress, statistically inevitable in the first 90 days, the real exposure would be 480 million. Morrison paled. Instead of minimal risk, we'd have $500 million in exposure. Precisely. Terence turned to the next screen. And there's more. The model assumes low correlation between medtech and other biotechs in the portfolio. But look at the real data. He scribbled on the whiteboard. When Moderna fell 23% in March, 10 other biotechs fell simultaneously. Systemic correlation of 0.87, not 0.23. Dead silence. Peterson typed frantically. Jennifer ran real-time simulations. My God, Peterson muttered. If he's right? He's not, Victoria snapped, but her voice sounded desperate. Our systems cost $50 million. For programmers who used incorrect historical data, Terence calmly interrupted. Perfect code executing faulty assumptions yields perfectly wrong results. Morrison stood, walking to the board. Dr. Peterson, confirm these numbers. Now. Peterson typed quickly, sweat beading on his forehead. 2 minutes that felt like hours, he stared in horror. His calculations are correct. If we apply the parameters he suggests, what would be real exposure? Morrison demanded. Peterson swallowed hard. 470 million at direct risk. Under severe stress, we could lose up to 600 million. Silence broken only by Victoria collapsing into the chair. A Korean investor addressed the interpreter. He wants to know how the young employee identified what experts missed. Terence took a deep breath. Because when you deliver coffee and organize documents, you see numbers that executives ignore. Because when you're invisible, you notice things that important people don't. And because math doesn't care about corporate hierarchy. Morrison turned to Victoria, his expression icy. Did you know about these stress testing reports? Victoria didn't answer. Did you know? Morrison shouted. The reports were preliminary, she murmured. Peterson stood up, his own anger bubbling over. Victoria, You suppressed analyses that showed catastrophic risk. Morrison turned to the Koreans. Gentlemen, we need to suspend until— We don't need to suspend, Terence interrupted. I can show you how to recalibrate the model to reflect real risk while maintaining viable operations. All heads turned. In 15 minutes, I can adjust parameters to give an honest assessment of medtech. It won't be the financial paradise they thought, but it will be a legitimate and profitable investment. Morrison glared at him. Do it. 15 minutes later, the room had been transformed. Terence stood before the monitors, no longer an invisible office boy, but the brilliant mathematician he'd always been. Handwritten equations dominated the state-of-the-art screens. There you go, pointing to new graphs. Model recalibrated with real parameters. Morrison studied the numbers. Projected profit of 140% instead of 340%. Risk of 50 million instead of 500 million. These numbers are honest. They're real, Terence confirmed. MedTech remains an excellent investment. It's just not the financial miracle the previous model suggested. The Korean leader spoke to the team, then to the interpreter. He prefers an honest return of 140% to an unrealistic promise of 340%. They want to proceed with new parameters. Morrison sighed with relief. IPO maintained, pricing correct. Young man, you saved not only this operation, but possibly the entire firm. Victoria, silent until then, found a voice. James, you can't accept analysis of a brilliant mathematician who spotted errors our team missed. Morrison cut her off. Victoria, I need to speak with you, privately. As Victoria was escorted away, Peterson approached. May I ask where you learned stochastic modeling? Professor Dr. Marcus Johnson at Howard. He was Fisher Black's advisor at Chicago. Peterson's eyes widened. Fisher Black, creator of the Black Skulls model. Did you study with someone who worked directly with him? For 3 years, Dr. Johnson always said that financial mathematics without intuition is just fantasy programming. Jennifer looked respectfully. Why didn't you mention your qualifications when you hired her? Painful reality returned. I mentioned it. It was on my resume, page 2, academic background. I applied for a junior analyst position 2 years ago. And I was rejected. HR said I wasn't a cultural fit. A heavy silence. Peterson and Jennifer exchanged uncomfortable glances, understanding the euphemism. Eleanor, who had been watching from the doorway, came in. Terence, may I see your original resume? Terence pulled a folded document from his pocket. Eleanor scanned it, then looked at Jennifer. Jennifer, do you remember this resume in 2022? Jennifer picked up the document, her eyes widening. Howard University, magna cum laude, thesis on probabilistic models. This resume is extraordinary. How was it rejected? Who did the initial screening? Elena asked. Victoria, Jennifer replied automatically, then paled. Morrison, who had returned, heard the end of the conversation. Are you saying Victoria knowingly rejected a qualified candidate? Peterson nodded gravely, and that even as a candidate, as an office boy, he identified errors that cost $500 million. Morrison sat down heavily. How many other Terences do we have in unsuitable roles? How many talents do we waste because of prejudice? The phone rang, the vice president of the firm. The conversation was brief, the word fired mentioned several times. Morrison hung up and turned to Terence. Victoria Sterling no longer works at Goldman, and you have a decision to make. What kind? I'm offering a position as Director of Quantitative Risk Analysis, salary, $200,000 plus bonus, starting Monday. Terence's legs felt shaky. In 2 hours, he went from $15 office boy to CEO. There's one condition. I want you to lead a full audit of our models and identify other employees whose talents are being underutilized. Terence looked around, Peterson and Jennifer seeing him as an equal, Elena smiling proudly, Koreans nodding respectfully. Accepted. But I knew it was just the beginning. Goldman would discover that real transformation doesn't just come from recognizing talent, it comes from questioning why it was overlooked in the first place. A month later, Terence walked the halls with a completely different perspective. His office boy uniform had been replaced by a Hugo Boss suit. His green badge had been swapped for an executive's gold. Most importantly, he was now seen. An office on the 44th floor overlooked the Hudson River. and a bookshelf with financial mathematics texts finally held pride of place. On the desk were two frames, a Howard University diploma and a photo with his father on graduation day, a reminder of why fighting was worth it. The Hidden Talents program had already identified 23 underqualified employees. Maria Santos, a cleaning lady with a master's degree in computing, developed security algorithms. David Kim, a night security guard with an MBA, coordinated Asian market analysis. Sarah Mitchell, a receptionist with a background in economics, led corporate sustainability. Mr. Williams, the assistant, announced over the intercom, "MedTech investors have arrived for the quarterly meeting." Terence smiled. In 30 days, the recalibrated IPO had exceeded realistic expectations. A 150% return was as predicted, with no surprises or catastrophic losses. The Koreans not only maintained their commitment, but also brought in partners. At the meeting, Morrison greeted him warmly. "Terence, the Koreans want to expand investment. You've never seen such precise risk analysis." During his presentation, Terence noticed something impossible a month earlier: genuine recognition in everyone's eyes. Not surprise or condescension, but true professional respect. After the meeting, he went down to the basement to check on the program's progress. He found Elena training employees in skills identification. "How's it going?" "Amazing," Elena beamed with excitement. "We found that 34% of support staff are overqualified. And resistances? Minimum. After the Victoria case, no one wants to be caught ignoring talent out of prejudice." Terence nodded, but he knew cultural change would take time. There were still executives who saw him as an anomaly, not evidence of a systemic problem. Subtle attempts at marginalization persisted, but something fundamental had changed. Goldman now had mandatory review policies, blind recruitment processes, and diversity committees with real power. At the end of the day, Terence stood at the window, watching the hustle and bustle of Wall Street. People rushing about, doing business, building fortunes. Among them, how many invisible Terences? How many talents wasted by systems that saw uniforms instead of potential? Phone vibrated. Message from mother. "Proud of you, son. Your father would be thrilled." Terence smiled, touching the photo on the table. Samuel Williams had worked 3 jobs so his son could go to school. He never saw Terence graduate, but lessons in dignity and perseverance made this moment possible. A person's true value isn't diminished by being temporarily ignored. Like a rough diamond, it remains intact, waiting for the right moment to reveal its brilliance. In your workplace, community, perhaps even home, who might be invisible right now? What extraordinary talents hide behind ordinary titles? And what would happen if you were the one who finally saw them? Wall Street had learned a valuable lesson. Genius doesn't come with a price tag. And sometimes the brightest minds are pushing carts, not sitting in meetings. Terence Williams' transformation from unseen office boy to CEO in a single afternoon isn't just an inspiring story. It's an urgent warning about how much talent we're wasting every day. How many people around you are working far below their potential? How many Terences are there in your company, school, or community, just waiting for someone to finally notice them? And more importantly, when was the last time you really paid attention to them?